Do your best to understand why. Do your best not to personalize it, because oftentimes it's not about you. It's not always about you. It's not as much about us as we think it is. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's more about us than we think it is, but a lot of times it's not. And I would just say work with that and see what that feels like.
What does rejection trigger? Is it triggering not competent enough, not smart enough, not valuable enough? Or is it triggering unlovable? I'm just unrelatable, I'm unlikable, people don't like me, people never have, I don't fit in. Like, what's the narrative?
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another episode of Next Level University, where we help you level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. We hope you enjoyed our latest episode number 1647, yesterday's episode. Today, for episode number 1648, the worst advice we've ever gotten for rejection. Not just us, we're not the only ones that have gotten this advice, but I have seen this all over the place on social media, and it's usually said by very, very confident people who don't really know what it's like not to be confident. So maybe for them, this makes total sense, and this advice lands 100% of the time. For me, it never landed at all. Never made any sense to me. I never could get on board with it and never resonated with me. And the advice is, go get rejected as many times as you can, because every rejection is one step closer to a yes. Every no is one step closer to a yes. And I think that's the dumbest shit ever. I think that's the dumbest shit ever. And the reason I think that is because you could say that to a losing team. I know you lost 14 games in a row, but every loss is one step closer to a win. Unfortunately, that's not true, because there are teams that go 0-18. It happens. It doesn't mean you're... That's like saying every heartbreak means you're closer to finding your dream partner. I can understand why you say that, because it means that person wasn't your dream partner. But if you don't do anything different and you just do the same thing and you go in with that mindset, it's not going to serve you. Okay, let me try to cook an egg. Oh, that one I burnt and it went terribly. Well, I'm one egg closer to figuring out what works. Yes, but only if you change the approach. If you keep the same approach, you're going to get the same results no matter how many times you do it. That's the way experiments are done. That's how it works. You change things, and when you do an experiment, you always have a
hypothesis?
No. There's the control group. There's a control group where it's always the same. Nothing changes. It's always the same. It's always the same. And then that's how you get your measurements, by testing out other stuff. And again, I'm not a scientist, so please don't read too much into that.
Science Kev. But
yeah, I wanted to do an episode on it because I think it can become one of those things, and you've referenced this many times, Alan, it's not a you thing, it's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you've ever heard someone say, well, you're just one no closer to a yes, and you thought to yourself, that doesn't make any sense to me. Because every time I get rejected, I don't want to do it anymore. That's, I think, where the growth is. I think the growth lies in, well, what is rejection to you? What does it mean? Does it mean something about you personally? Does it mean something about your dream that you're trying to pursue? Does it mean something about your competence? Does it mean something about your attitude, your personality, your character? Then when you start to get into it deeper and deeper and deeper, you can hopefully unwrap and unlayer what rejection really means. I've gotten rejected more in the last 5 years than I have in the previous 32. Oh, no, sorry, I'm not that old. 30, 29, whatever it is. But in the beginning, it sucked. I was not thinking, oh, I'm closer to getting yeses. It was more, oh, why am I so afraid of getting rejected in this scenario anyway? And then that's where I started. And I worked through that, and I worked through that, and I worked through that. And then when I did get rejected, whatever that means to you, I guess it's specific to what you're going through. But then I would try to reflect and figure out, okay, what happened there? Where were the mistakes I made? Or I did everything to the absolute best I feel like I possibly could, and it didn't work out. Okay, sometimes it's not going to work out. Last thing before I kick it to you, sorry. I tell clients this all the time. And if you're an entrepreneur, this will resonate. Some people just aren't going to purchase whatever you want them to purchase. Some people aren't going to attend the thing you want them to attend. Some people are just going to say no. to whatever it is you have to offer. They're not ready to say yes. Sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. And that was one of the best pieces of learning I got early on. You can say the right thing in the right way, at the right price, at the right weather, at the right time of day, and somebody might still say no because they're just not ready yet. So sometimes rejection is less about you than it is the person who's rejecting you, for lack of better phrasing.
Yeah, so one thing I wanted to ask you, Kev, is I think on this journey, although rejection has definitely affected us both, I think it's affected you more. Can you talk about why? Because that advice of every no is one step closer to a yes. In my sales career in corporate, I would say that mentality is accurate, assuming a bunch of things.
Yeah.
Assuming a bunch of things. And that's why I think it's not great advice, because it's a fortune cookie phrase that doesn't actually teach you how to improve and actually succeed. So, for example, every no is one step closer to a yes if you reflect upon what you did, what you said, the relationship that you built, and then you, upon reflection, have new distinctions and new understandings, and then implement those new distinctions and new understandings the next time you proceed. And so that's a lot of ifs. And that's why I think that advice is silly. Because, well, all you got to do is work out consistently and you'll be in the best shape of your life. That's another surface level thing that has truth to it, but only if you improve your workouts each time, only if you diet as well, only if you hydrate too, only if you sleep well and track it. Oh, and by the way, you have to actually train in this specific way if you use weights and cardiovascular. So there's just all these ifs. And so any piece of advice on the surface, anything that sounds really easy, is there's things beneath the surface that make it not easy at all. If you find the right person, your marriage will be magnificent. Okay. If you are emotionally intelligent, if you are constantly checking in on the love languages, if you are consistently grateful, if you
are growing,
growing
personally as a human being, you're growing on your
if you're
own.
focused on self-improvement, if you XYZ. And it just goes if. Okay. If you are hardworking and if you work hard and you work smart, you will succeed in business. If the economy actually needs what you're selling, if people, right? So there's 1,000 ifs. So my question for you, Kev, to turn it back to you is, I used to be someone who didn't struggle with rejection nearly as much as you, although I've come to understand that I still definitely do. Why do you think that advice doesn't land, particularly for emotionally driven people who tend to not be in sales roles?
It's because it's just, it right off the bat is suggesting losing is easy. I think it's that simple. Because I've caught myself saying that on other podcasts where it's motivational to say it's not failure unless it's final. Unless you quit, you can't really fail. But I also understand when you get knocked down 7 times, it's a lot easier to quit because you feel like a failure.
Yeah.
So
feeling like a failure is the worst.
It's the worst.
Yeah, it's so bad.
That's what it is, because it's great advice. Cool. That's cool. That's maybe it's powerful. Maybe there's lessons in that. Maybe there's some wisdom in that. But if I never identified as the type of person who is good at losing. Losing for me felt final. It felt like if I get a rejection, that's just a sign that I'm just going to get rejections. I don't imagine there's wins hidden here somewhere. And I also wasn't someone who was focused on improving. It was, this is what I have, this is what I'm doing, this is what I have to offer. Because for me, it started from a me thing. I was afraid of getting rejected personally, and that carried over to everything that I did. That was the big thing.
There's a lot of science underneath the habit loop of trigger, behavior, reward. And that's the simplest form of the habit loop. Trigger, behavior, reward. So trigger might be, I want to sell this product, or I need to fill this event, or I need to pay the bills. Behavior is reach out to someone who you think is interested or might be interested in your product or service. Reward is, holy crap, they said yes. Awesome, I made a sale. The problem with the habit loop is that a lot of times the rewards don't come.
Yeah.
And so you get your momentum constantly crushed. And the neuroscience shows that if you don't get the dopamine hit of a yes, the habit loop doesn't reinforce. And I don't know how I've personally overcome that in my past. I'm still trying to figure that out. But for whatever reason, I somehow found a way to make failure feel okay, and I still get the dopamine hit. And to a detriment now. That's actually been a bottleneck for us now. Because now I'm so okay with failure that we will just keep failing at the expense of what could be W's. And so I'll aim higher than I should. I've come around on that in my 30s as I've matured of you need to find the optimal stopping problem between the right amount of failure and the right amount of success for each individual.
Yeah.
And that's what we talked about with self-belief. If you have level 2 self-belief, shoot for level 2 goals and then hit them, and then you'll build level 3 self-belief. Now you shoot for level 3 goals, hit them, and then you'll build level 4 self-belief. None of that was on my radar.
Yeah.
Because when you have a lot of self-belief, for some reason, you don't need the dopamine. You can get rejected 30 times in a row, and it doesn't change your self-belief. I don't know why. It does a little bit. It definitely does a little bit, but it's not nearly as much. But if you don't have a ton of self-belief in the tank, you kind of can't handle that many rejections before you want to quit.
Isn't it just delusion on the other end? Like, I used to work with a kid who I'd always wonder how he had such attractive partners. Because he wasn't a great looking guy. He wasn't in shape. He was very, very rough around the edges. And we had some fun. I partied with him a lot on the road, and we had some fun. He was one of those people, Alan, where when you drink with him, he'd get very serious and open up and be very vulnerable. But then the next day started, he'd be back to like ego, shield, that.
Course.
So I always had a soft spot because when we would drink together, we'd always have really deep conversations about life. And then I saw him operate. When we would go out, he would just walk up to a group of girls and talk to all of them. And he didn't care. He just didn't care if he got rejected. It didn't bother him at all.
I think it's because of the protector.
That's
think
fair.
it's the ego.
Yeah.
I am convinced that even in my past, and I don't want to make this about me, but anyone who is a sales professional or corporate, you've heard people say, like, you have to have thick skin in sales.
Yes.
What do you mean by thick skin? I think what you mean is emotionally disengaged from self to where you're impervious to the pain of rejection. And I think that a lot of that is just protectors. It's the wall that you build up. And I didn't understand this until I became more emotionally mature later on in my late 20s and 30s, where now I realize, dude, it affects me more now. Rejection didn't used to affect me at all.
Interesting.
Not nearly as much. But now that I'm connected to my emotions much more than I used to be, it affects me way more. I think I'm better at it, and I still don't let it affect my self-belief, but it is different than it used to be. Whereas I think that when you have shields up, it's almost like, you've heard that quote on probably Instagram or social media where it says, the walls you build around your heart to protect you from the bad guys and girls also keep out the good ones.
Yeah.
And I believe that if you want to live a wholehearted life, you have to be vulnerable. And when you haven't practiced being vulnerable and emotionally connected to yourself, it's easier to just get rejected and let it wash off you because you don't let life touch you at the same level. And because of my challenging childhood, I had these protectors that did protect me from rejection more. But I also, in tandem with self-belief, and I'm still trying to figure all this out, but at the end of the day, are you one of those super professionally developed, high degree, you have all the accolades and, you did really well academically and you dress nice and you're super professional like me, but you don't let rejection really touch you because you believe in yourself and you're thick-skinned? Or are you on Kevin's end where you're super connected to self, you're emotionally intelligent, you feel your way through life, and you maybe struggle with self-confidence, but you're very humble and that's your superpower? If that's, I think you and I have kind of come to 5 a lot, where you've come to my way and now rejection doesn't affect you as much, and all of a sudden rejection affects me more now. Just so you know, rejection affects me more than it used to, definitely. And I think that as you've become more intellectually sound and professionally developed, I've become more emotionally sound and emotionally developed. And I think that it is different when you're connected to your emotions, and when you feel these things, it hurts. That's the best way to describe it. Is it hurts.
I felt dirty.
Hello, NLU listener. Thank you, as always, for listening to Next Level University. Real quick, I just want to jump in and let you know about the Next Level Dreamliner. This is a journal that I use every single day. Achieve your dreams 90 days at a time. It breaks down your dreams into goals, milestones, and daily habits. We hope you enjoy it. The link will be in the show notes.
I've had times in my life where I dealt with rejection and I egoed up, and I always knew it wasn't true.
Yeah.
I knew this is a great example of it. And I was a very young man at this stage, so I didn't know any better. This was middle school. I remember I was dating Amy, one of the most popular girls in our school. And we were like, I don't know, how old are you in middle school? By dating, we said we were dating. Okay, we didn't eat lunch together or go out on dates.
Were you in her AIM profile?
Yeah, I must have been. We were official.
AOL Instant Messaging?
Yeah, it must have been. We were official.
We were AI. That was before Facebook official.
Yes, that was way before Facebook official. I remember I was coming back from gym class one day, and one of my buddies was like, "Yo, Amy's breaking up with you." And I remember I was like running down the hall, and I looked back and I said, "Oh, I don't care. No big deal." But I remember I was devastated.
Yeah,
I was absolutely devastated. That's a really good example of me trying to ego through it. But I knew when you recluse back, it's like, did you ever play that game where you punch somebody in the shoulder, like as hard as you can, and the last person to take it was like the winner?
No.
You never did that? We played some weird games. You'd have that moment.
You used to play that quarters game, right? Where you
I used to
rip your knuckles apart?
I played that with Thomas. Remember TJ?
Oh, yeah.
He was a giant human being.
A barbarian, yeah.
I played with him, and there's pieces of my knuckle on the science tables, for sure. I lost a lot of games of that.
He was the center of my basketball team in middle school. We crushed. We did a good job. Yeah,
him and I were really good friends. And one time, and he was just messing with me, but one time I said something, and I'm not kidding, he grabbed me with one hand by my shirt and lifted me up and held me against the wall like a scene from a movie. And I respected him a lot more after that. But you'd have this moment where somebody punches you in the shoulder and you just look at him. And you're like, oh, okay, that's it? But when they leave and you slink off into the darkness, you're like, oh, God, that hurts so bad. You know it's not real. You know...
Yeah.
You know what you put on was a show.
Yeah.
I try to do my best to know when I'm putting on a show.
Yeah.
I've always tried. So
yeah. Prior to my car accident at 26, Kev, I didn't know when I was putting on a show. It's almost like, the shields you put up, the walls you put up to protect yourself from pain also keep out love and joy and fulfillment and connectedness. And I'm convinced that you can't live a fulfilling, wholehearted life without feeling your emotions. And I've done a lot of emotional work in the last many years, my 30s in particular, the therapy side of things. I mean, it's so obvious to me now when a guy has not done therapy. It's so clear. But I didn't know before.
Yeah.
It's just so obvious when they're so... It's... they are pretending that nothing affects them. That's what it is. And it's like, that's not real. When you're alone by yourself, you're miserable. I know you are. And that's okay. Like, I'm not making that wrong. But you have to let life touch you. Don't let it kill you, but let it touch you. I cry at movies. You need to let... I remember early in our relationship with Emilia, we watched Good Will Hunting. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. And there's a scene at the end with Robin Williams, R.I.P., and Matthew McConaughey. Not Matthew McConaughey, Matt Damon. And they have this really powerful, vulnerable, healthy masculinity moment. And he was abused in his childhood in the movie. It's a phenomenal film. And that always gets me. That scene always gets me. And I remember Emilia at the time, and she grew up in an environment that didn't have a ton of emotional vulnerability. She got up and was doing something. And I said, sweetheart, I waited this whole movie for like that. This is why I watch film. I want to feel this. Please don't distract us right now. I want to feel this emotion. One more quick story here. We watched The Notebook, and The Notebook is notorious for being a tearjerker. I mean, a lot of people cry during The Notebook. With Emilia, she had a memory challenge that I've talked about on the show. For the new listeners, we've worked really hard to get her really good sleep. I bought her a book called Memory Recovery, and she's implemented literally everything in it. We eat blueberries in our salad on purpose for the brain, like all kinds of stuff. And her memories come way up, which is awesome. But I remember when we first watched The Notebook, when we first got together, and we fell so head over heels in love, we knew we would be together forever. And I remember being very scared. It's like, are you going to forget me? Because in The Notebook, spoiler alert, the wife forgets the husband, and that's what the movie's built on. But I remember wanting to be in the feels. Here's the problem with not letting life touch you, and this comes back to rejection as well. If you don't let life touch you, you won't grow inside. You might grow in tactics and strategies and external results, but you won't grow inside. You won't unlock parts of your emotional soul and your inner side of things. And I never knew that I was numbing pain with alcohol for a time with drugs. And there was definitely parts of you and I's childhood where we were pretending to be macho.
Definitely. Yeah.
And it's just so obvious now how not macho we were. And not just us, but other people that are still doing that. And I never understood how obvious that is to people who actually are emotionally connected. And so I do want you to know, and all our listeners in particular to know, ever since I became more emotionally mature and more emotionally connected to myself, rejection has hurt more. It has affected me more. I couldn't just pretend it didn't bother me anymore. And so I do want everyone to know that the sales professionals of the world, statistically speaking, probably are more professionally developed than they are personally developed. And I would go out on a limb and actually say that.
It makes sense. I think it's I think it's an internal thing. I think you got to go internal when it's an external thing like that. And this is another interesting thing. Can you really become something until you admit that you're not that something? Like, can you really become vulnerable until you admit you're not vulnerable? Can you really become comfortable with yourself until you admit that you're not comfortable with certain pieces of you? I think that's the journey. But the ego stops you from admitting that.
Well, what you're referring to is acceptance.
Yeah.
There's a modality of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy, and that's exactly what it is. Let's accept what is. Because it's not just admitting that you're not, Kev, it's also admitting that you are.
Yeah, that's true.
So if you're really, really, this is scary to share, but I've always been extremely intelligent ever since I was a kid. And until I admitted that to myself and accepted that about myself, I couldn't really lean into it either. I almost had to hide from it and pretend I wasn't and not accept, It's
you
this
and I have
weird...
had very different lives.
Yeah.
Well, but I would never, that's the beauty of our relationship and the fact that we do the business and the podcast and everything, coaching and live events together the way we do, is because that's a blind spot for me. For me, it's always been about accepting weaknesses, not strengths. I don't have any problem accepting strengths because I'm so used to accepting weaknesses.
Yeah.
the
I think
strengths.
you need acceptance on both ends.
Of course, but I
Yeah.
think you're really good at accepting the one that you're the opposite. I'm really. I love when people tell me I'm great at stuff. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Doesn't really do much for me. Like I appreciate it. I feel good. But I'm so used to taking L's that cool. I love it. I that's cool. Like that's good. I'm so used to not
Yeah.
feeling good enough that when people tell me I'm good enough, that's great. I'm all good there.
Well, I think that's the other reason you're triggered by the advice at the beginning of the episode, which is every no is one step closer to a yes. Because you're afraid of failure, not success.
100%.
And whereas someone, and we're going to talk about this on a later episode, but we're going to talk about the 2 types of courage. Is that the next one?
No, the next one is Freestyle Friday, son. Get your S together.
Oh yeah, Freestyle Friday,
Yeah.
which we've gotten good feedback.
We have
Thank
gotten
you
good
all so
feedback.
much. It's good. I enjoy those thoroughly. But on Monday or Sunday, I forget which day.
He's got no idea.
Saturday, Sunday, or Monday.
Sunday.
It's the best I've got. Okay, Sunday. Sunday, we're doing an episode on the 2 types of courage. And spoiler alert here, the first type of courage is social, and the second type of courage is competence. And I think that, to Kevin, to your point, and to sort of the dialogue we've been having, I always felt competent enough. I always felt smart enough. I always felt capable enough. But I never felt likable. I never felt like I get along well easily with others. So my protectors, of course it's not going to affect me when people reject me. I've been rejected my whole life.
Yeah.
In terms of like being the unlikable, people talking behind my back. People have been talking behind my back my whole life. My whole life. So I just created this thick skin that I was bullied. I had to. And so of course, but now that I'm more connected and those protectors are down, I think I can connect more with our listeners. I think I can connect more with people. I know I can connect more with Emilia, but it affects me more. It affects me more when people reject me or when people make fun of me or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so what really gets you, though, is you get rejected, and I think unconsciously your brain goes, well, does that mean I'm not good enough? Is my product not good enough? Am I not valuable enough? It triggers my unlovable. It triggers your not good enough.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that the question I would ask our listeners to ask themselves is, what does rejection trigger? Is it triggering not competent enough, not smart enough, not valuable enough? Or is it triggering unlovable? I'm just unrelatable. I'm unlikable. People don't like me. People never have. I don't fit in. Like, what's the narrative?
I would second that. That would be my next level nugget with yours, because I think that's that's the value for this episode. Is if that resonates with you, awesome. Go get rejected. Awesome. Good. That's good. That's a good thing. If it doesn't resonate with you, what do you feel about rejection? What is the trigger? And what advice would you give yourself for rejection? If I could give myself advice, if I could go back and give myself advice, I would say, do your best to understand why. Do your best not to personalize it, because oftentimes it's not about you. It's not always about you. It's not as much about us as we think it is. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's more about us than we think it is, but a lot of times it's not. And I would just say work with that and see what that feels like. So that would be my next level nugget. Rejection's a strange thing. It's a strange thing. It's invisible for the most part. It's energetic, but it's something that definitely affects us all in some way, shape, or form, whether we admit it or not.
And if you do want to succeed in your career or in an intimate relationship, you're going to have to risk rejection.
I think that's the best
that
advice.
Person on a date. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're going to have to risk it. You have to risk it.
If you want to go from where you are today to where you want to get to, you're going to have to risk no's.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be some. There's going to be some.
Yep.
But if you use them as an opportunity to change things and improve things, then you might get yeses.
Yeah, and start small. Maybe you don't have to do 100 no's in a day.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 1 no today and 2 next week, and shoot for 5 the week after or whatever, and maybe you'll get some yeses. You might be surprised. We have one team member, she said, Alan, I've never actually gotten rejected. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's like, well, people just work with me.
Good for you.
Okay, good for
Yeah,
you.
good
That's
for you.
awesome. And also, what else could you accomplish
Right,
if you actually were putting yourself out there more? So to that person, we love you. And now she's actually putting herself out there more, which is cool. But
Next Level Nation, if you have not yet gotten your tickets, whether it's virtual or in person, please reach out. I think the in person, we're coming close to selling out. Today is Wednesday. We're recording this on Wednesday. But as of Thursday, if you're listening to this, just reach out. Go on the website. If it allows you to buy a ticket, there's still some, whether it's virtual or in person, or you can just reach out to us. We'd love to have you. Super excited. The team is flying in tomorrow. I'm going down to the Airbnb tomorrow, so all is happening. What are you laughing at?
we will be personally offended and we will cry in the corner if you reject us. No, I'm kidding. That's all I could think in my head. Is
Okay.
just make that joke.
Is there anything you'd like to say before we go, good sir?
Next Level Live is going to be awesome.
It is going to be awesome.
It's going to be a life-changing day for anyone involved. That is, I'm stating it, and we're going to prove it. And it's Saturday, and I'm pumped.
Right on. Okay. Tomorrow, for episode number 1649, Freestyle Friday. Don't know what the title is. As you know, if you're a first-time listener or a newer listener, Freestyle Friday, Alan and I just jump on the mics and kind of go and see what happens. So I don't know the episode title before we do it, but you'll see what the title is because we'll have one. As always, we love you. We appreciate you. Grateful for each and every one of you. And at NLU, we do not have fans. We have family. We will talk to you all tomorrow.
Got to take the risk to live your best life. Next Level Nation.